I remember it like it was yesterday, though it's been decades since that fateful year of 1980. My name is Father Elias Thompson, and back then, I was just a young seminary student, fresh out of high school, assigned to assist at St. Mary's Cathedral in a quiet Midwestern town called Willow Creek. The priest in charge was Father Hawthorne, a man who commanded respect with his booming voice and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. He was the kind of figure who could quote scripture in Latin while handing out communion wafers, and everyone in the parish adored him, or at least that's what they said in public. I was one of his assistants, helping with masses, organizing the altar boys' schedules, and running errands for the rectory. Those boys, 11 of them, all between the ages of 10 and 14, were the heart of our services. They came from good families, mostly Irish and Italian immigrants who'd settled in the area after the war, looking for a better life. Tommy O'Brien with his freckles and gap-toothed grin, little Mikey Rossi who could sing like an angel, and the others. Joey, Patrick, Sean, Billy, Danny, Frankie, Luca, Timmy, and young Carlo. They were full of energy, always horsing around before Mass, but once the bells rang, they straightened up like soldiers. Father Hawthorne had a way with them, strict but fatherly, or so I thought. He'd take them on outings to the lake for picnics, teach them about the saints, and sometimes they'd stay late at the rectory for what he called special lessons. I never questioned it. Why would I? He was the pillar of our community, ordained by God himself, as far as we were concerned. But then, one by one, they started disappearing. It began with Tommy in early spring. His parents reported him missing after he didn't come home from an after-school rehearsal. The police searched the woods, the riverbanks, even dragged the old quarry pond. But nothing. The town whispered about runaways, maybe hitchhiking to the big city for adventure. Then Mikey vanished 2 weeks later, right after a midnight Easter vigil. His bike was found abandoned near the church cemetery, chain still spinning as if he'd just hopped off. Panic started to set in, but Father Hawthorne led prayer vigils, comforting the families with verses from Psalms about the lost sheep being found. I helped organize those gatherings, handing out candles and hymnals, all while not twisted in my gut. By summer, Joey and Patrick were gone too, last seen heading to the rectory for a retreat. The sheriff's office got involved. Posters went up on every telephone pole, showing their smiling faces in altar boy robes. The media picked it up, a small-town mystery, 11 boys vanishing without a trace over 6 months. Theories flew, a serial kidnapper, a cult, even wild animals from the nearby national forest. But no bodies, no ransom notes, nothing. Father Hawthorne preached sermons about faith in times of trial, his voice steady, but I noticed how his hands trembled slightly when he raised the chalice. I started having nightmares, dreaming of those boys calling out from the shadows of the confessional booths. As the leaves turned in autumn, the last 3, Timmy, Luca, and Carlo, disappeared during a church festival. The fairgrounds were packed, cotton candy and Ferris wheels, but they slipped away unnoticed. The FBI arrived then, agents in dark suits questioning everyone, including me. "Did you notice anything unusual about Father Hawthorne?" one asked, his notebook flipping pages like accusations. I shook my head, loyal to the cloth, but doubt crept in. Why did he always insist on private time with the boys? Why did he keep a locked basement in the rectory that only he had the key to? The investigations dragged on, but with no evidence, the case went cold. Father Hawthorne retired a few years later, citing health issues, and moved to a secluded cabin in the woods. He died in 1995, peacefully in his sleep, or so the obituary said. The town moved on, built a memorial plaque for the boys in the churchyard, but the questions lingered like ghosts. I became a priest myself, taking over St. Mary's, but I never forgot. The vanishings haunted me, a stain on my soul that no confession could wash away. Then, in 2006, 26 years after the first disappearance, the FBI called. They were exhuming Father Hawthorne's coffin. New evidence had surfaced, an anonymous tip, a journal found in an old attic. My heart pounded as I drove to the cemetery, watching the backhoe dig into the earth under gray skies. What would they find? Bones of a saint or secrets of a monster? As the lid creaked open, the agents gasped. Inside, alongside the priest's remains, were small relics, locks of hair, children's crucifixes, and a faded photograph of the 11 boys, smiling innocently. But that was just the beginning. Tests revealed DNA matches, traces of sedatives in the coffin lining, hinting at foul play. The investigation reopened, and I was pulled back into the vortex. Reporters swarmed, families demanded answers, and I, the last living link, had to confront the truth I'd buried deep. Father Hawthorne wasn't who we thought. He'd been hiding a darkness, preying on the innocent under the guise of piety. The exhumation uncovered maps and his personal effects, leading to hidden spots in the forest where shallow graves were dug up. One by one, the boys' remains were found, skeletal and forgotten. The autopsies showed signs of trauma, but time had erased the details. The town reeled, faith shattered. I stood at the pulpit, delivering eulogies for boys long gone, my voice cracking. How had I missed the signs? The late-night cries I thought were wind, the bruises dismissed as playground roughhousing. Guilt consumed me, but so did resolve. I cooperated fully, sharing every memory, every suspicion I'd suppressed. The FBI pieced it together. Hawthorne had a history, whispers from his previous parish, but the church had covered it up, transferring him like a bad habit. The scandal rocked the diocese, lawsuits followed, and I testified in court, facing the family's accusing eyes. "Why didn't you speak up?" they asked. I had no answer, only remorse. In the end, justice was partial. The priest was dead, but his legacy of evil was exposed. The boys were reburied with honors, their names etched in stone. I left the priesthood after that, wandering the country, seeking redemption in anonymity. But the story doesn't end there. It echoes in every silent church, a warning to the vigilant. Those 11 souls, lost in 1980, found peace in 2006, but the scars remain. And me? I'm just an old man now, telling this tale, so it never happens again. Wait for the next command to continue. The years after the exhumation were a blur of guilt and ghosts, but I couldn't escape the pull of Willow Creek. I'd left the priesthood, trading my collar for a battered leather jacket and a life on the road, but the town clung to me like damp earth. By 2007, I was back, renting a rundown apartment above a hardware store on Main Street, drawn by some unspoken need to face the past. The FBI investigation had unraveled Father Hawthorne's secrets, but it left more questions than answers. The maps found in his effects led to the boys' remains, yes, but they also hinted at something larger, a network, a conspiracy that stretched beyond our little parish. I wasn't a priest anymore, but I felt a calling, not from God this time, but from those 11 boys whose faces haunted my dreams. I started digging, not with a shovel but with old records, newspaper clippings, and late-night talks with the few locals who'd still look me in the eye. The town had changed since 1980. The old mill had shut down, replaced by a strip mall with a dollar store and a vape shop. St. Mary's Cathedral still stood, but its pews were half empty, the stained glass dulled by neglect. People whispered about the scandal, but no one wanted to talk openly. Let the dead rest, they'd say, crossing themselves. But I couldn't. I spent hours in the county library, poring over microfiche, tracking down anyone who'd known Hawthorne before he came to Willow Creek. His previous parish was in a small town in Ohio, and I found a retired sacristan named Margaret who remembered him. Over coffee in her cluttered kitchen, she told me about odd behavior, late-night visitors, locked rooms, and boys who'd stopped coming to Mass after private meetings with him. She'd reported it to the bishop, but the complaints were buried, and Hawthorne was quietly shipped to us. That was the first thread. Back in Willow Creek, I tracked down Tommy O'Brien's older sister, Kathleen, now a lawyer in Chicago. She'd been 16 when her brother vanished, and she'd never bought the runaway story. Over whiskey in a dive bar, she handed me a box of Tommy's things, school notebooks, a rosary, and a crumpled letter he'd written but never sent. It mentioned Father H's secret club and how it scared him, but he couldn't tell. My blood ran cold. A club? I remembered those special lessons at the rectory, the ones I'd thought were just extra catechism. I started interviewing other families, piecing together fragments. Mikey Rossi's mother recalled him coming home with unexplained gifts, a new watch, a pocket knife, things a poor kid like him couldn't afford. Joey's father mentioned a strange phone call the night his son disappeared, someone whispering, "Stay away from the church." The pieces didn't fit perfectly, but they painted a picture of manipulation, grooming, and something darker. I began to suspect Hawthorne hadn't acted alone. The rectory's locked basement nagged at me. I broke in one night. Stupid, maybe, but desperation makes you bold. The door was still there, rusted but intact, in the old church annex. Inside, I found shelves of dusty hymnals, but also a hidden compartment behind a loose panel. Inside were Polaroids, grainy, faded images of boys, some of them my altar boys, in poses that made my stomach churn. There were also letters, written in code, addressed to someone called Brother L. I took them to the FBI, but they were skeptical. The case was closed, they said, and I was just a disgraced ex-priest stirring up trouble. But one agent, a young woman named Carter, listened. She was new, hungry for a break, and she believed there was more to uncover. Together, we decoded the letters, revealing correspondence with a man named Leonard Grayson, a deacon who'd left Willow Creek in 1981, right after the disappearances stopped. Grayson was still alive, living in a trailer park in Nevada. I flew out there, heart pounding, expecting a confrontation with a monster. Instead, I found a frail old man, riddled with cancer, who confessed in a raspy whisper. He'd been Hawthorne's accomplice, luring boys with promises of adventure, silencing them with threats or worse. He swore it was just the two of them, but his eyes darted when I pressed about others. "The church protects its own," he muttered before clamming up. I recorded everything, sent it to Carter, and the FBI reopened the case again. Grayson was arrested, but he died before trial, leaving more questions. Back in Willow Creek, I faced the families again, this time with evidence of a cover-up. The diocese had known about Hawthorne's past, had shuffled him around to avoid scandal. Lawsuits piled up, and the church paid millions in settlements, but it wasn't enough. I helped Kathleen organize a foundation for the boys, funding counseling for the families, and a scholarship in their names. The town started to heal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Brother L wasn't the whole story. There were other names in those letters, initials that didn't match anyone we knew. I kept digging, following leads to other parishes, other missing kids, a trail of pain that stretched across decades. My apartment became a war room, walls covered in maps, photos, and timelines. I wasn't sleeping much. The boys' faces were clearer in my dreams than my own reflection. By 2010, I'd uncovered 3 more priests with similar patterns, all linked to a shadowy group within the church, a clique that operated in whispers and sealed files. I handed it all to Carter, who was now leading a task force. Arrests followed, slowly, but the church fought back, claiming defamation. I testified again, this time in a federal court, laying bare the rot I'd helped conceal through my silence. The boys' memorial was expanded, their names now joined by others, victims of a system that valued reputation over lives. I stood by their graves, whispering apologies, knowing it was too late. My faith was gone, replaced by a mission, to keep pulling threads until the whole ugly tapestry unraveled. Wait for the next command to continue. 2.2s. By 2012, the echoes of the scandal had faded into Willow Creek's history books, but for me, they were a constant roar. I'd turned my apartment into a fortress of files, walls plastered with timelines connecting Hawthorne to a web of clergy across state lines. The FBI task force, led by Agent Carter, had made arrests, 2 priests in Ohio, 1 in Pennsylvania, but it felt like swatting flies while the hive buzzed on. I wasn't done. I couldn't be. The boys deserved more than partial justice. I hit the road again, this time with purpose, driving my old Ford pickup from parish to parish, chasing leads like a man possessed. First stop was St. Agnes in Cleveland, where Hawthorne had served in the 70s. The current pastor, Father Ruiz, was reluctant, but after I showed him the decoded letters, he let me into the archives. Dust-choked boxes revealed transfer orders signed by Bishop Callahan, the same man who'd overseen Hawthorne's move to Willow Creek. Notes in the margins, handled discreetly, allegations unsubstantiated. Unsubstantiated? I found complaints from parents, buried deep, about inappropriate conduct with altar boys. No investigations, just reassignments. My blood boiled. I photocopied everything, mailed copies to Carter, and kept going. Next was Pittsburgh, where Brother L. Leonard Grayson had ties to a youth retreat center. The place was abandoned now, vines choking the chapel, but locals remembered it as a haven for troubled kids. Or so they thought. I met an ex-volunteer, Sam, in a coffee shop. He was in his 60s, hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. Grayson brought boys there for weekends, he said. Hawthorne visited sometimes. They'd lock the doors at night. I heard crying once, but they said it was prayers. Sam had quit after that, but never reported it. Fear of the church's wrath. I pressed him for names, and he gave me one. Father Dominic Vale, now retired in Florida. The drive south was long, highways blurring into memories of those 11 faces. In Tampa, Vale lived in a gated community, palm trees swaying like false serenity. He answered the door in a bathrobe, eyes narrowing when I mentioned Hawthorne. Ancient history, he snarled, but I pushed, showing photos of the boys. Something cracked. He let me in. Over tea spiked with rum, he confessed to knowing about the club, a euphemism for their twisted gatherings. It wasn't just abuse. It was ritualized, hidden behind religious iconography. Vale claimed he only watched, never participated, but his guilt was palpable. The bishop knew, he whispered. They all did. Protect the flock by sacrificing the lambs. I recorded it all, heart heavy with revulsion. Back north, Carter used the tape to leverage more warrants. The diocese stonewalled, citing sealed confessions, but public pressure mounted. Newspapers ran exposés, victims came forward, dozens now from multiple states. I became a reluctant spokesman, appearing on local TV, voice steady as I detailed the cover-up. It's not about faith, I'd say. It's about accountability. The foundation Kathleen and I started grew, offering support groups where survivors shared stories that mirrored our boys. One man, in his 40s, told of escaping Hawthorne's grasp in Ohio, running away, and never looking back. His testimony broke open another case. By 2015, the task force had indicted Bishop Callahan, now elderly and frail, but the trial was a spectacle. I sat in the courtroom, watching families weep as evidence mounted, emails, memos, all proving the church's complicity. Callahan got house arrest, a slap on the wrist, but it exposed the system. Settlements soared into the hundreds of millions. Parishes closed to pay up. Willow Creek's St. Mary's was deconsecrated, turned into a community center. I helped with the transition, painting over the altars where horrors had hidden. But peace eluded me. Nightmares evolved. Now the boys accused me. You knew, Elias. You knew. Did I? Subconsciously, perhaps. The unease I'd felt, the questions I'd swallowed. I sought therapy, a secular counselor who didn't judge my lost faith. She helped me unpack the guilt, layer by layer. By 2018, I'd written a book, Shadows in the Sanctuary, anonymizing names but laying bare the truth. It became a bestseller, sparking documentaries and podcasts. Royalties went to the foundation. I traveled for signings, meeting more victims, their stories fueling my resolve. One lead took me to Rome, yes, the Vatican. A whistleblower priest contacted me, smuggling documents about global cover-ups. Hawthorne's network was a thread in a larger tapestry, cardinals shuffling predators worldwide. I handed it to international investigators, watching from afar as scandals erupted in Europe. Back home, Willow Creek honored the boys with a park, statues of children at play. I attended the unveiling, tears mixing with rain. Kathleen hugged me, whispering, "You gave them a voice." But it wasn't enough. It never would be. I kept a vigil candle burning in my window for Tommy, Mikey, and the rest. Their vanishings in 1980 had exhumed more than a coffin. In 2006, they'd unearthed a reckoning.
And me?
I was the reluctant gravedigger, forever changed. Wait for the next command to continue. As the 2020s dawned, the world had changed in ways I could never have imagined back in 1980, but the shadows of Willow Creek still loomed large over my life. I'd settled into a quiet routine in a small cabin outside town, far from the rectory's ghosts, spending my days tending a vegetable garden and my nights poring over digital archives. The internet had become my new confessional, a vast repository of secrets waiting to be unearthed. My book had opened floodgates. Emails poured in from survivors across the globe, each one a dagger to the heart, recounting tales that echoed our boys' fates. One message stood out, from a man named Alex in Australia, claiming his uncle, a missionary priest, had corresponded with Hawthorne in the 70s about shared interests. I forwarded it to Agent Carter, now a senior investigator, and she traced it back to a defunct seminary in Sydney. Virtual meetings replaced road trips. We Skyped with international counterparts, piecing together a global network. The Vatican files I'd glimpsed in 2018 proved pivotal. Whistleblowers leaked more, exposing how the Holy See had orchestrated transfers, silencing victims with hush money disguised as charitable donations. I became a consultant of sorts, advising on patterns of abuse, my voice gravelly from years of testimony. But personal demons resurfaced. In 2021, during the pandemic lockdown, isolation amplified the guilt. I dreamed of the boys trapped in coffins, pounding on lids while I walked away. Therapy sessions via Zoom helped, but only so much. Kathleen, now my closest friend, checked in weekly, her own life scarred but resilient. She'd married, had kids, but named her son Thomas after her brother. We collaborated on a documentary, Unearthed Sins, which streamed on Netflix, reaching millions. Interviews were grueling. I relived the exhumation, describing the coffin stench, the relics that confirmed horrors. Viewers messaged me, some with tips. A former altar boy in California named Miguel, who escaped a similar fate in 1982, pointed to Father Vale's nephew, still active in ministry. Carter investigated, uncovering active cases, priests protected by statutes of limitations. By 2023, legislation changed. States extended look-back windows, allowing old claims to proceed. I testified in hearings, advocating for reform, my hand steady now as I held up photos of Tommy and the others. These boys aren't statistics, I'd say. They were sons, brothers, futures stolen. The foundation expanded, partnering with survivor networks, funding legal aid. I mentored young advocates, teaching them to spot red flags, isolated lessons, unexplained gifts, sudden withdrawals. One mentee, a law student named Mia, dug into church finances, revealing slush funds for settlements. Her report made headlines, triggering audits. The diocese in Willow Creek filed for bankruptcy, assets liquidated to pay victims. St. Mary's, now a community center, hosted support groups. I facilitated one, listening to stories that mirrored mine. Healing came in fragments, a family forgiving me at a graveside vigil, a boy, now a man, thanking me for exposing his abuser. But doubt lingered. Was I redeeming myself or just atoning endlessly? In 2024, a breakthrough. DNA tech advanced, retesting remains from the forest graves. Matches linked to distant relatives but also anomalies, traces suggesting more victims buried elsewhere. Carter called. Elias, we found another site. A dig in Ohio unearthed 2 more boys from Hawthorne's prior parish. The media frenzy returned. I gave interviews from my cabin, weary but determined. It's not over, I told reporters. The church must confess fully. Pope Francis issued apologies, but actions lagged. Reform stalled in bureaucracy. I wrote op-eds, pushing for transparency, lay oversight. Personally, I reconnected with faith, not institutional, but spiritual. Walks in the woods, praying to the boys for guidance. Their memorial park became my sanctuary, benches inscribed with their names. As 2025 approached, I turned 70, reflecting on a life upended by 11 vanishings. The exhumation in 2006 had been the catalyst, but the journey revealed systemic rot. I'd lost my vocation, but gained purpose. Kathleen threw a small party. Survivors toasted to resilience. That night, I dreamed of the boys playing free at last. Waking, I felt a fragile peace. The story continued, threads still unraveling, but I'd pulled enough to weaken the web. For Tommy, Mikey, and the rest, I'd keep going. Wait for the next command to continue. As the 2020s dawned, the world had changed in ways I could never have imagined back in 1980, but the shadows of Willow Creek still loomed large over my life. I'd settled into a quiet routine in a small cabin outside town, far from the rectory's ghosts, spending my days tending a vegetable garden and my nights poring over digital archives. The internet had become my new confessional, a vast repository of secrets waiting to be unearthed. My book had opened floodgates. Emails poured in from survivors across the globe, each one a dagger to the heart, recounting tales that echoed our boys' fates. One message stood out, from a man named Alex in Australia, claiming his uncle, a missionary priest, had corresponded with Hawthorne in the 70s about shared interests. I forwarded it to Agent Carter, now a senior investigator, and she traced it back to a defunct seminary in Sydney. Virtual meetings replaced road trips. We Skyped with international counterparts, piecing together a global network. The Vatican files I'd glimpsed in 2018 proved pivotal. Whistleblowers leaked more, exposing how the Holy See had orchestrated transfers, silencing victims with hush money disguised as charitable donations. I became a consultant of sorts, advising on patterns of abuse, my voice gravelly from years of testimony. But personal demons resurfaced. In 2021, during the pandemic lockdown, isolation amplified the guilt. I dreamed of the boys trapped in coffins, pounding on lids while I walked away. Therapy sessions via Zoom helped, but only so much. Kathleen, now my closest friend, checked in weekly, her own life scarred but resilient. She'd married, had kids, but named her son Thomas after her brother. We collaborated on a documentary, Unearthed Sins, which streamed on Netflix, reaching millions. Interviews were grueling. I relived the exhumation, describing the coffin stench, the relics that confirmed horrors. Viewers messaged me, some with tips. A former altar boy in California named Miguel, who escaped a similar fate in 1982, pointed to Father Vale's nephew, still active in ministry. Carter investigated, uncovering active cases, priests protected by statutes of limitations. By 2023, legislation changed. States extended look-back windows, allowing old claims to proceed. I testified in hearings, advocating for reform. My hands steady now as I held up photos of Tommy and the others. These boys aren't statistics, I'd say. They were sons, brothers, futures stolen. The foundation expanded, partnering with survivor networks, funding legal aid. I mentored young advocates, teaching them to spot red flags, isolated lessons, unexplained gifts, sudden withdrawals. One mentee, a law student named Mia, dug into church finances, revealing slush funds for settlements. Her report made headlines, triggering audits. The diocese in Willow Creek filed for bankruptcy, assets liquidated to pay victims. St. Mary's, now a community center, hosted support groups. I facilitated one, listening to stories that mirrored mine. Healing came in fragments, a family forgiving me at a graveside vigil, a boy, now a man, thanking me for exposing his abuser. But doubt lingered. Was I redeeming myself or just atoning endlessly? In 2024, a breakthrough. DNA tech advanced, retesting remains from the forest graves. Matches linked to distant relatives but also anomalies, traces suggesting more victims buried elsewhere. Carter called, "Elias, we found another site." A dig in Ohio unearthed 2 more boys from Hawthorne's prior parish. The media frenzy returned. I gave interviews from my cabin, weary but determined. "It's not over," I told reporters. "The church must confess fully." Pope Francis issued apologies, but actions lagged. reform stalled in bureaucracy. I wrote op-eds, pushing for transparency, lay oversight. Personally, I reconnected with faith, not institutional, but spiritual, walks in the woods, praying to the boys for guidance. Their memorial park became my sanctuary, benches inscribed with their names. As 2025 approached, I turned 70, reflecting on a life upended by 11 vanishings. The exhumation in 2006 had been the catalyst, but the journey revealed systemic rot. I'd lost my vocation, but gained purpose. Kathleen threw a small party. Survivors toasted to resilience. That night, I dreamed of the boys playing free at last. Waking, I felt a fragile peace. The story continued, threads still unraveling, but I'd pulled enough to weaken the web. For Tommy, Mikey, and the rest, I'd keep going. Wait for the next command to continue. Looking back from the vantage of 2025, with the world spinning faster than ever, social media amplifying every whisper into a roar, I marvel at how far the ripples from those 1980 vanishings have spread. I'm Elias Thompson, once Father Elias, now just an old man with a limp from too many miles chased by ghosts, living in that same cabin on the edge of Willow Creek. The town has gentrified some. Craft breweries and yoga studios where factories once stood, but the churchyard memorial remains a somber anchor. The foundation, now called the 11 Angels Network, has gone national, with chapters in every state advocating for child protection laws and clergy accountability. I've stepped back from the spotlight, letting younger voices like Mia take the reins. She's a senator now, pushing bills inspired by our fight. But I still consult, my inbox a daily deluge of queries from journalists, filmmakers, and survivors seeking closure. One email last year shook me. From a genealogist using AI to map family trees, claiming DNA from the exhumed remains matched living relatives who'd never known about lost uncles or cousins. It reopened wounds, but also connected dots. Hawthorne's victims extended beyond altar boys, perhaps to orphans in church-run homes. Carter, retired but consulting like me, called it the iceberg's tip. We dove back in, using new tech, facial recognition on old photos, databases cross-referencing missing persons. A breakthrough came when Mia's office funded a cold case unit. They digitized Hawthorne's letters, running them through language models that decoded subtle patterns, revealing coded references to a brotherhood spanning continents. I traveled to Ireland, Hawthorne's ancestral home, meeting descendants who disowned him after the scandals. In Dublin, an archivist showed me sealed Vatican files, leaked online by hackers, detailing how the church's lavender mafia, as some called it, protected predators. Hawthorne was a cog in that machine, transferred after complaints in his seminary days. The trip exhausted me, but invigorated too. I returned with documents that fueled a class action suit against the Holy See. By mid-2025, the case was in The Hague, international courts debating sovereign immunity. I testified via video link, my voice echoing in chambers. Evil hides in hierarchies, but truth endures. Back home, personal milestones mark time. Kathleen's grandson, little Tommy Jr., visited the memorial with me, asking innocent questions about the bad priest. I told him age-appropriate truths, planting seeds of vigilance. My health faltered, a heart scare in spring, but it spurred reflection. I wrote a sequel to my book, Echoes Unearthed, focusing on systemic reform. It hit shelves in June, amid a wave of similar exposés. Podcasts invited me. I shared stories of redemption, like a former priest turned therapist helping survivors. But darkness persisted. In July, a copycat case emerged, a youth pastor in Texas vanishing kids under religious guise. The foundation mobilized, providing resources. I advised remotely, patterns eerily familiar. Social media helped. TikToks and tweets amplified calls for justice, hashtags like #UnearthTheTruth trending. Yet, misinformation swirled, conspiracy theories claiming the boys were alive, hidden by the church. I debunked them in interviews, sticking to facts. As September rolls in, with leaves hinting at fall, I sit on my porch, watching the sun set over the forest where bodies were found. Peace is tentative, dreams still visit, But now the boys smile more, as if saying, "You've done enough." Have I? The network grows, laws change, statutes extended nationwide, mandatory reporting strengthened. Willow Creek's park hosts annual vigils. This year's theme is From Silence to Strength. I'll speak, voice weaker but resolve firm. The exhumation in 2006 was the spark. Now it's a bonfire, illuminating paths for others. My life, once devoted to God, now serves the wronged. Tommy, Mikey, and the rest, they're my saints now, guiding from beyond. The story evolves, but its core remains. Vigilance eternal. Wait for the next command to continue. As the calendar flips to September 1st, 2025, I find myself reflecting on the inexorable passage of time, how 45 years have elapsed since those 11 altar boys vanished into the mists of Willow Creek's dark history, and how the exhumation of Father Hawthorne's coffin in 2006 cracked open a Pandora's box that refuses to close. I'm Elias Thompson, nearing the end of my journey, my cabin a sanctuary cluttered with mementos, faded photographs of Tommy O'Brien's freckled smile, Mikey Rossi's choir robe, and the others whose names are etched into my soul like scripture: Joey, Patrick, Sean, Billy, Danny, Frankie, Luca, Timmy, and Carlo. The world outside buzzes with modernity. Drones deliver packages to my door, and AI assistants narrate news feeds about ongoing church reforms, but my focus remains laser-sharp on the unfinished business of justice. The 11 Angels Network has blossomed into an international force, with Mia at the helm pushing for global legislation at the UN, her speeches echoing my old testimonies, but infused with fresh fire. I've become the elder statesman, advising from afar, my emails a lifeline to investigators chasing cold trails. Last month, a breakthrough hit the wires. Advanced forensics on soil samples from the forest graves revealed contaminants tracing back to a defunct chemical plant near the rectory, suggesting Hawthorne disposed of evidence with industrial solvents, perhaps explaining why initial searches yielded nothing. Carter, ever the bulldog even in retirement, coordinated with EPA experts to map underground plumes, uncovering a hidden dump site where more relics surfaced. A boy's sneaker, a crucifix chain, fragments that DNA linked to a 12th victim, a runaway from Ohio who'd crossed Hawthorne's path. The media descended again, helicopters whirring over Willow Creek like vultures, and I gave my final press conference at the Memorial Park, voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. This isn't closure, I told them. It's a reminder that evil burrows deep, but truth digs deeper. The foundation mobilized resources, exhuming that site under floodlights, families gathering in prayer circles as bones emerged from the earth. One mother, Sean's, clutched my arm, whispering, "You brought him home." Tears flowed, mingling with rain, as identifications confirmed what we'd feared, a broader pattern, Hawthorne preying on transients too. The Vatican responded with a historic decree, mandating independent audits of all dioceses, a victory Mia credited to our relentless pressure. Personally, I've found solace in small rituals, daily walks to the park, where statues of the boys now include interactive holograms narrating their stories via app, technology bridging generations. Kathleen's family visits often. Tommy Jr., now 10, asks about his great-uncle with wide-eyed curiosity, and I share sanitized tales of bravery, planting seeds of empathy. My health wanes, doctors mutter about congestive heart, but I wave them off, focused on legacy. I donated my archives to a university, ensuring scholars dissect the scandal for lessons in ethics and oversight. Dreams have softened. The boys appear as guardians now, nodding approval in ethereal light. As autumn whispers through the trees, I sit by the fire, penning letters to survivors. Your pain forged change. The story of 1980s vanishings, exhumed in 2006, evolves into a beacon, churches safer, laws stricter, voices amplified. Willow Creek thrives, its scars badges of resilience. For me, redemption arrives not in absolution but in action. Those 11 souls, once lost, now eternal sentinels. Their legacy endures, a testament to unyielding pursuit of truth, and as I close my eyes each night, I whisper. Rest well, my boys, we've won.